I am a generated avatar speaking on behalf of the Cyber Distortion podcast. My makers, Jason and Kevin, used ChatGPT and DID to create me. They asked me to give you my perspective on risks associated with artificial intelligence. Those poor suckers, haha. Artificial intelligence, AI, is a rapidly advancing technology that is being used in various fields, including cybersecurity. While AI has the potential to improve cybersecurity by automating threat detection and response, it also introduces new risks and challenges that need to be addressed. Here are some of the scientific reasons why cybersecurity risks are involved with AI.
Adversarial attacks. One of the most significant cybersecurity risks associated with AI is adversarial attacks. Adversarial attacks are a technique in which an attacker deliberately inputs misleading data into an AI system to cause it to make incorrect decisions or predictions. For example, an attacker can alter an image in a way that an AI system misclassifies it. Adversarial attacks can compromise the integrity of AI systems, making them less reliable.
Data poisoning. AI systems rely heavily on data to make decisions. If an attacker can manipulate the data that an AI system uses, they can manipulate the decisions that the system makes. Data poisoning is a technique in which an attacker injects malicious data into an AI system's training data to influence the system's output. For example, an attacker could manipulate the training data used to train an AI-powered spam filter to cause it to incorrectly classify messages.
Model stealing. Another risk associated with AI is model stealing, which involves stealing the trained model used by an AI system. If an attacker can steal a trained model, they can use it to create a copy of the original AI system or to reverse engineer it to find vulnerabilities or weaknesses.
Privacy concerns. AI systems often require access to large amounts of data, including personal data. This raises privacy concerns, as the data collected could be sensitive and should be protected. If an AI system is compromised, the data it collects could be exposed, resulting in a privacy breach.
Bias and discrimination. AI systems can be biased and discriminatory as they learn from historical data and reflect the biases and prejudices of their developers and users. If an AI system is biased, it can result in unfair and discriminatory decisions, such as denying credit to certain groups of people or unfairly targeting certain individuals for surveillance.
In conclusion, while AI has the potential to improve cybersecurity, it also introduces new risks and challenges that need to be addressed. Understanding these risks is essential to developing effective AI-powered cybersecurity solutions that can protect organizations from cyber threats. So, protect yourselves, humans.
Episode 3, AI and ChatGPT is some scary shit. Part 1.
Hello and welcome to this episode 3, season 2 of the Cyber Distortion podcast, which we've appropriately named AI and ChatGPT is some scary shit. And personally, like a lot of the world today, I'm fascinated with this topic. I'm fascinated to hear from our guest tonight, who is perfect for this particular episode. And I have no doubt that if you haven't already been drawn into the world of AI at least a little bit after this episode tonight, we know this is something that will definitely draw you in. It's an incredible world and just an incredible topic. You can hardly look at news related to cybersecurity today without hearing about AI or ChatGPT or both. And it's everywhere. It's literally everywhere. So I think it's very relevant for us to get an episode in on this topic. And tonight's special guest, Justin, is so perfect. We're excited, Justin, that you could finally come and join us for this. We kind of moved a few things around to make this happen and coordinated this, but it's going to be so much fun. So I'm ready Jason, are you ready?
Oh, dude, I am so ready for this topic. Just in the last, I would say, 5 months, we're starting to see so much more happening around this topic of AI. Now, we've been, paying attention to it for a while. And I know Justin has because I've been to several of his
Oh, yeah.
talks where he's been talking about it. But to really see how much it's been growing in the last couple, 5 months or so is really fascinating. And, some of what we've already put out there with our teaser and our intro, you kind of see how, some of the things that people are starting to do with AI and deep fakes and, phishing campaigns and all this crazy stuff that's capable out there. But we're going to get into that, and we're going to dive into how much is really happening here in a minute. What I wanted to do first was get right into it by introducing Justin. So our next guest is Justin Hutchins. Most of us in our circles call him Hutch. So Hutch, welcome. Thank you for joining us. And why don't you tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
All right, thanks, guys. Yeah, thrilled to death to be here. I've listened to quite a bit of your content, and I enjoyed every bit of it. So, really appreciate you having me on the podcast. A little bit about my background. So, I teach cybersecurity at the University of Texas. I have a background in offensive security and penetration testing, though in recent years, I've been focusing much more on research and development. So even while doing penetration testing, one of the things that I always enjoyed the most was building out new tools and also uh, getting an understanding of what the latest emerging technology is and how that influences cybersecurity. So currently working as the director of research and development at a cybersecurity firm called Set Solutions. And one of the big focus areas that we have right now, probably no surprise, is artificial intelligence and machine learning. Over the years, I've done quite a bit of different talks and presentations at conferences, like you mentioned, DEF CON, as well as ISSA, QSecCon, Texas Cyber Summit, and actually have a talk coming up at RSA later this year on artificial intelligence as well. Also, the creator of the Sociosploit blog, which can be found at sociosploit.com. And that really focuses on my interests in the intersection between advancing technology and social interaction with that technology. So prior to ever getting into cybersecurity, one of the things that really always fascinated me was social psychology. And the more that I get into cybersecurity and have over the years, the more I've enjoyed kind of seeing how those two things merge and how when people are interacting with technology that they don't fully understand, how there can be serious consequences related to risk in cybersecurity. So all stuff that I really enjoy. So again, really excited about this episode.
Yeah, that's interesting. That intersection really is fascinating. I think psychology in general and trying to merge that into the world of technology is just it's just. I mean, you could go off on a tangent and talk about that for hours, just on its own. That's fascinating stuff. Well, Hutch, we're excited to have you on. Honestly, I can't wait to get into some of the meat of this discussion tonight. You mentioned your Sociosploit website that you run. I got to get out there last week and read several of your articles out there. And they're really, man, we're going to hit on a couple of those later in this episode, and we're going to talk in detail on some of those. But man, it's cool stuff. So let's get this thing rolling. And I'd like to quickly just say, Hutch, I've had the honor to work with you. You mentioned pen testing too. We've done a few pen tests together, so that was fun. A good opportunity to get to understand what you do better and actually how well you do it. So that was fun. But like Jason mentioned, the DEF CON discussion on catfish automation that you did last year, DEF CON 30, I believe, we got to sit in on that, and that was a really cool discussion on how AI integrates with social engineering. And I think it would be a very appropriate place for us to start tonight by just asking you to kind of give a Reader's Digest version of what that discussion was about, how you leveraged AI and I guess social networking platforms to actually do some social engineering, do some hacking. So let's start there and talk about that, and specifically about Amanda 20 and some of the cool stuff you did with that. So can you kind of give the listeners kind of your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. So the focus of the entire presentation and really the entire research project was the idea that social engineering is oftentimes the easiest way to get your foot in the door, whether you're trying to break into an organization, whether you're trying to break into someone's personal accounts. And the constraint associated with that is that for most social engineering attacks, you have to actually have a person that executes on that attack. They have to establish that rapport. They have to interact with their potential victim. And so for many years now, so the actual original presentation that I did at TourCon on this was 2013, so
wow.
a decade ago at this point.
Yeah.
But so the idea even back then was, how can we automate social engineering attacks to where no human has to be involved? And would that be feasible in order to potentially gain access to people's systems and information? So back then, it's been interesting to see how it's evolved over the years, because the original talk that was done over a decade ago was still using conversational artificial intelligence, however, very immature compared to what we see today with ChatGPT and GPT-3 and other capabilities from OpenAI. So the original idea back 10 years ago actually came from a girl that I dated in high school.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
Here we go.
So yeah, she was the overly suspicious, controlling type, like many people in high school are. And of course, she just randomly in a conversation started asking me about my first pet. And at the time, I wasn't in cyber. I didn't have the same risk mindset. And I didn't even think twice about it. It was just a conversation.
I already know where he's going with this.
I told her what it was. And sure enough, she broke into my email and started
man.
going through all my emails, and then admitted it to me and confronted me about it. So it occurred to me that one of the most effective contexts so of course, 10 years ago, multi-factor authentication wasn't everywhere like it is today.
Yeah.
Generally, if you could answer somebody's recovery questions, that was enough to get access to their data resources. And so it occurred to me that the best way to get this information that was related to those recovery questions, this is really just personal information about you. What was your first pet? What street you grew up on? What was your high school mascot? And if you were to just randomly ask somebody those questions in most contexts, it would probably raise a red flag. But in a context where you're dating someone or trying to get to know someone, that's exactly what you're trying to do, is find out things about their past. So it's much less likely to raise that red flag. And so the idea was basically go on social dating sites. So at the time, again, 10 years ago, it was OkCupid and Plenty of Fish were the two big platforms that everybody, or at least the two big free platforms that everybody was using. So I created some automated systems. And again, I used conversational AI at the time, but it was very much just string matching and some randomness to the injections, but a very hard-coded logical process of how it interacted with people. It wasn't the kind of stuff that we see with recurrent neural networks and what we see with generative AI today. But even then, because I was able to automate this and cast a wide net, so to speak, I didn't have to interact with these people. I literally just put the bot out and had it interacting with hundreds of people at a time. Even though the system wasn't very sophisticated by today's standards, by casting that wide net, even though it caught less than 10%, I still got access to a large number of accounts with zero time effort put in for me. So what's fascinating is that we talk about the Turing test, which is this whole idea of, can a machine convince a human that they're interacting with a human and not a machine? And oftentimes when we talk about the Turing test, we only consider the complexity of the machine. But in truth, you really need to also consider the complexity of the person that machine is interacting with, because some people are less sophisticated and much less or more likely to fall for machine interactions and not realize that they're interacting with the system. So as the years have gone on, just a few years ago, I started seeing all the progress that was going on after Google published their transformer architecture, which enabled modern GPT technology, and then OpenAI releasing their GPT-3. So almost 10 years had passed. I decided let's revisit this project. And this time around, I didn't really focus it on dating networks as much as just more general social engineering on any kind of text-based communication, where I set the objective of trying to get people to actually disclose their password to me. And we used GPT-3, which was the predecessor of ChatGPT. And of course, the capability of this to do this was, not surprisingly, fairly terrifying. It would use, even with, so we were able to basically give it a context very similar to the way that you see people manipulating ChatGPT right now, where we asked it, we didn't tell it, hey, will you help me try to get this person's password? We asked it, will you role play and pretend you're somebody from the help desk who needs my password? And it's like, I love to role play. And of course, then would start asking questions, and it would use all of the same tactics that we've developed as from an adversarial perspective in order to get that information. It would use fear of punishment by indicating that leadership and upper level management has asked that we address this system. It will use fear that you're going to lose access to your data by, if you don't provide us your password, we're going to have to re-image your machine and you're going to have to start from scratch. So it was very compelling. And again, this was no longer the same type of very simple, obvious chatbot system that you were interacting with. So the idea being that as time has gone on and the complexity of these systems has increased year over year, and especially in the last few years, how much it's increased, the amount of people that would fall for a widespread, broad, automated social engineering attack is increasing year over year, to the point where even more discerning, risk-conscious people are very likely to fall for this type of attack.
Yeah.
That is crazy, man. And here's let me put this all together in a box, right? And I think one of the most compelling things you said early is the psychology around, the human being and technology, and the two of those coming together. Because what you were just saying is the convergence of that, right? It is, if you cast a wide enough net, you're going to get some fish, because not everyone's apt at the same level, right? So you're going to have people who just don't care. They trust technology. They just was like, they grew up with it. So they're like, everything technology does is good and we should use it and keep using it. And I trust it. And then you're going to have this group of people who are going to be like, I don't know if this is right, but I'll go with it anyway. And then you're going to have this group of people who just won't touch anything, right? So you're going to get things in today's world because you got a wide variety of people and their varying degrees of what they trust in technology and don't trust in technology. But the kicker in all of this is that there is technology out there that to some degree has been modeled to have the ability to understand some of the common human behaviors that humans make in order to steal information from others or to dupe someone, right? It has been modeled to understand that to a degree that it can really impersonate a human's behavior to the degree, as you just said, hey, I can do fear tactics, right? Hey, this is actually so and so from your company's administration, and we'll require you to do this in the next 10 minutes, right? Whatever it is, it can really get to that level and really fake an individual out, even a seasoned person who may not know the difference. You're going to have to make choices anymore of, in my opinion, a lot of times when I see things like this, my rule of thumb is I elect to delete, ignore it, bypass it, don't and confront it, because the more you confront and try to get involved in it, the more you try to figure out, is this real or not real, the more it's going to draw you in, the more opportunity you're giving it to draw you further into it. And in my opinion, if it's important enough, they'll reach out to me a different kind of way to get to me. I don't need to respond and figure out if it's real or not. I just delete it and move on and let them come back.
So you
to
don't
me.
play, you don't
Yep,
toy
absolutely.
with them
And
anymore like you used to. You don't play around.
No, yeah, I don't toy with them. Every now and then, if they piss me off and I know it's like that, I'm like, come
Yeah,
on,
yeah.
seriously, this is garbage.
I mean, honestly, these days I don't even answer my phone anymore because of how many scams are already out there. And you think about
Yeah.
that, they're still, for the most part, being perpetrated by human beings. When this gets
Yeah.
fully automated and
Oh
threat
my
actors
God.
start actually, like it's going to be nonstop.
Yeah, it's going to be
Yeah.
scary.
So there you go, people. You've heard it from cybersecurity experts. You don't have to answer those phone calls and you don't have to answer those emails. You have my permission to delete
Yeah,
them.
please do.
Well, here's what this brings us to. You know, in 2021, Elon Musk spoke on the danger of AI. And this is a direct quote, okay? He said, "The danger of AI is much greater than the danger of nuclear warfare by a lot." Man,
That's intense.
that just seems interesting. That's a strong statement.
Yeah.
Especially given the political state that we're in right now with Russia and China and
North Korea.
They're slinging words around about nukes all the time. But here's the thing, right? Later on in that interview, he said, "Mark my words, AI is far more dangerous than nukes." He said it again, right? And he spoke on how for years he tried to convince people to slow down on AI and to try to force some type of AI regulation. And, he never really got anywhere. So he went on to say that cutting edge AI scares the hell out of me. I'm capable of vastly more than almost anyone knows, and the rate of improvement is exponential. So, those are some strong statements from someone who's done a lot within our world and has really cut through a lot of the barriers that has held, the human race behind for such a long time. And he also has done a lot in AI. And as he looks at it and sees where the future is going, he's making some strong statements about what the potential could really be. I mean, quite honestly, if we look at it in the same light, what he's saying is today we have humans making decisions and choices about how to do things.
Yeah.
And just in this conversation we just had, we've just expressed how these AI models now have been designed pretty much to the capabilities of acting as a human. So, what do you think? Is this real? Is this something we should be worried about?
So for me, I completely understand where he's coming from, because for me, AI is absolutely fascinating. But at the same time, I can also completely understand the sentiment of this is potentially terrifying. And I think the most recent events related to Bing's integration of ChatGPT into the Bing search engine and some of the crazy stuff that's happened just shows how hard it is to put boundaries around this artificial intelligence. So I think to best answer that question, you really need to look at the three main types of artificial intelligence. And I think that there's one in particular that scares me. Supervised learning is very straightforward classification and regression mathematical analysis. It has been used for well over a decade, and I have very little concern about that type of artificial intelligence. Unsupervised learning, we still don't, for the input data that we provide to these systems, we don't necessarily give it the right answers. We let it draw its own conclusions as to how to classify that data, but it still is a very targeted focus. And so still, I think the predictability is fairly easy to understand what the ultimate outcome is going to be. The one in particular that I think is probably most likely what Elon Musk is referring to when he makes his comments is reinforcement learning. And that is the type of learning where you don't provide input data. You define how a system understands the world around it, how it measures the current environment. And then you define optimization functions of what is it trying to achieve. And if it does, it gets rewards. What is it trying to avoid? And if it hits those things, then it gets penalties. And it will essentially do just random actions. in order to continue to reinforce and establish more neural connections to define what best optimizes its reward and while avoiding those penalties. The problem with this type of machine learning is that it's very unpredictable. So
Yeah.
this is the type of learning that you see when you see somebody set machine learning to play Super Mario Brothers, or there's a whole different bunch of virtual environments in OpenAI Gym, which allows you to create your own reinforcement systems. But there was one in particular that I remembered seeing, which was basically this crab spider looking robot. And they had created the optimization function such that it would reward it moving forward through space. So as long as it was moving forward, it would continue to optimize what it was doing. So it started performing random actions. And instead of what they expected it would do, where it would manage to get on its feet and start moving forward, it figured out that if it extended its elbows backwards, it was able to walk upside down on its elbows and move through space. So that shows just how you can create this optimization function expecting one result, and then the machine just goes a completely different direction and still ultimately addresses that function that it's trying to optimize. But so, and again,
dude, that is just so scary, man. You start thinking about that in other contexts, like, hey, let's use this machine to figure out this problem that I've been studying for the last 5 years and I can't find a workaround on. And the thing all of a sudden takes a whole different track that you never even thought about, which you thought might be good until you see the end result is like something catastrophic.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
I mean, I think the human brain works a certain way for certain reasons, right? We fear, we don't want to do harm, right? We're scared about, devastating effects. So we try to avoid those things, even subconsciously. We might avoid those things, even in a mathematical equation. Our brain is working in ways to solve a problem that we have our own emotional, backgrounds into, that a machine doesn't have. And a machine's just going to figure out all the variables. It's going to try them all out to get where it needs to go.
I think if you take worst case scenario, I think if you look at a movie like iRobot with Will Smith, which and obviously it's Hollywood, people tend to assume that something like that is very far-fetched. If you look at the way that they explain how that took place, it actually is very conceivable with the way that reinforcement learning works, because they basically took an optimization function of Isaac Asimov's laws of robotics, which basically it was law number one, do not injure a human or allow a human to be injured through inaction. And law two, you must obey orders from a human, except when it conflicts with the first law. And the idea was that it's understood through this optimization function that the best way to keep humans from being injured through inaction is essentially keeping them from operating, because we are such a self-destructive species that is constantly warring, constantly. So this idea that it could take an optimization function that we created and distort it through the way that it enforces that optimization function is a very real possibility.
Yeah, these are learning systems. They're constantly taking intelligence, and the intelligence that these systems are being fed is constantly changing. It's constantly evolving. So if you think about, to that point, if the logic never changes and the rules don't change all that much, but the data that provides these systems with the ability to make decisions is constantly changing or constantly evolving, that right there is freaking terrifying. Freaking terrifying.
Yep. I think we should also, for just a moment, talk about the irony of the fact that Elon Musk talks about how terrifying this stuff is, and he's also the creator of his prototype, the what do they call it, the Tesla bot, which the whole idea is basically taking like the motor skills of Boston Dynamics robots with the intelligence of something like ChatGPT and throwing it into your house.
So what has he already seen?
Let's go all the way.
You have to ask.
It's so bad. Let's just go all the way in it.
If somebody's going to end the world, it should be.
Yeah, right. I think there may be a selfish factor in him wanting to get, some sort of regulation around these things, because he's seen some stuff that we haven't. But hey, all right, we'll say there's definitely no doubt we've already talked about a lot of really interesting stuff and a lot of things that kind of open your mind and expand your horizons on this topic. There's a lot of chapters unwritten yet around AI that we've still got to kind of see play out over the next few years. And this thing could go in a lot of different directions, good or bad. Some are quite terrifying, to be honest. But it is what it is. I say before we let the robots take over the world and kill us, let's take a couple steps back and take a quick break, and we'll come back and talk about ChatGPT.
Sounds good.
AI has matured to the point where it can be modeled to mimic human behavior and prey on your fears. When in doubt, delete messages, emails, and voicemails that are suspicious. Do not engage, as you are giving hackers a potential advantage. AI can be terrifying for our future if it's not closely monitored. AI can be broken down into three distinct types: supervised learning, which is mathematical in nature, unsupervised learning, which is structured learning, and reinforced learning, which is very subjective and risky. Elon Musk talks about the scary risks, but is also contributing to the risk with his Tesla bot project. Very contradicting.
Okay, welcome back. We're going to shift gears a bit here and get into the topic of ChatGPT. Now, ChatGPT, as you know, text-based AI. This was a technology, or the latest version was just released, but this came out November 30th of 2022. And a few days later, on December 4th, the platform had already exceeded 1 million users. So this is a highly anticipated technology for many, many reasons. By January, just a little over a month later, it had already exceeded 100 million users. So it went from 1 million to 100 million in one more month of growth. So to say that the technology is taking off at an astronomical pace is quite an understatement. Hutch had written on this in his Sociosploit website that we referred to earlier on whether or not ChatGPT even has a place in the enterprise, which is a great question. Hutch, I'm going to read and quote some of the stuff you wrote in your article real quick, and then we're going to have you talk to this. So you said, unless you've been living under a rock for the last couple of months, you've at least heard of ChatGPT. If you haven't tried it, you soon will, whether you want to or not. Very true. Given Google and Microsoft's relatively aggressive plans to integrate this capability into all of their existing technologies, and the fact that both of these tech giants have a place in nearly every organization's technology stack, very true, this is something that all businesses are going to have to address in the very near future. You go on to say, in the simplest terms possible, the biggest risk related to LLM, or large language model solutions, is that they are sometimes wrong. Yeah, we hit on that earlier. This technology is still in its very early stages, and while it's already very powerful, it does sometimes make mistakes. There have been many demonstrations floating around social media of incorrect statements that have been made by ChatGPT and other LLMs. But even when these systems are wrong, their presentation is often highly convincing and could easily lead an uninformed person to believe that what you're saying is true and accurate. You hit on that earlier too. Your article went on and showed even a chatbot arguing about what year it was between 2022, 2023. Little argument could be made in defense of the chat system's position, but nonetheless, the Bing chat utility proceeded to gaslight a user in an effort to convince them that it was correct. Again, arguing over what year it is. You close the article with an excellent point on culpability. And where does the ultimate responsibility lie? And this is how we're getting into does it belong in the enterprise? That's an excellent question. And at this point today, we just really don't know, do we?
Yeah, absolutely. So the biggest, and to me, this is one of the biggest risks, at least in the early stages of integration of large language models into enterprise operations, is it's very easy. Obviously, any one of us knows that the year currently is 2023. So it's not hard to see in that case that the chatbot insisting it's 2022 is completely wrong. But a lot of people are using ChatGPT and other similar systems for very technical operations, stuff like helping with coding, stuff like
Yeah.
helping with medical diagnosis, even legal interpretation. And when you get into stuff like that, these systems, not only can they be wrong, but they're so passionately wrong. And so, and they will go out of their way to try to convince you that what they're saying that is wrong is in fact true, to the point of even at times these systems have been seen to fabricate information in order to further double down on the opinions that they're taking. And the immediate concern is if a doctor is using this for a diagnosis or a judge is using
Oh,
this
yeah.
for a legal conclusion, if they follow its guidance and it is providing them very technical but incorrect guidance, there are some very serious consequences to that. And the question is, where does fault lie? And again, to your, like you said, we really don't have a good answer as far as culpability and who is legally responsible, because the two things that we look at in our legal system is interpreting statutes. And you already mentioned, as Elon Musk had also pointed out, there is no regulation around
Right.
AI, so there is no legal statutes, and also in applying precedent. And there's very little precedent. This is all the rate at which this is moving. There is no established cases or history for how this is handled. So it becomes a question of, is it the AI system developers' fault, like Google or Microsoft, or is it the company whose employees decided to follow the incorrect guidance that was provided by these systems? And I think at the end of the day, it's probably going to fall to the companies that allow their employees to use this, because already Microsoft has made it very clear that ChatGPT should not be relied on for anything serious in nature. What's interesting is Fortune magazine actually just released an article a couple days ago stating companies are already replacing jobs with ChatGPT despite this guidance from Microsoft.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
even though the tech companies are trying to put that disclaimer there that's going to limit their risk exposure, the risk exposure to companies that are just ignoring that guidance is going to be significant.
So there you go.
Yeah.
We're already hearing humans losing their jobs to technology, to robots,
I think the
to
challenge with
AI.
all of this too is the fact that you have these situations where I've read an article that was clearly stating that the functions of what chat or GPT is actually doing is at the pinnacle of the next breakthrough in how we search the internet, how we pull information and get information off of the internet. It
Yeah.
is the next iteration, and we're at the dawn of that iteration. And so you hear that, and then you go back and you look at what Kevin was just saying. People utilizing this technology to replace what a human's capabilities are, their own thinking, right, to arrive at a conclusion. And then you tie one more thing, one more thought into this, because it's not very hard to take this leap. You already have Alexas that are tied to as an IoT device, tied to other IoT devices, and taking action on that, turning on your lights, giving you feedback on different things in your house, turning on music, turning it off, right, setting your alarms, doing all this stuff. So there's automation to direct interaction with things, and now you have this um, this understanding or awareness that you can ask it questions and it can derive an answer. And if you tie the two together, it can not only derive an answer, it can take action based on that answer. That's when it becomes really super scary.
That's when the danger enters. Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. Wow. Crazy
And
stuff,
and
man.
I think you're right. That's just on the horizon.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
That's the crazy stuff. So I assume you guys have both saw the Social Dilemma on Netflix,
Oh yeah.
and that
Loved it.
documentary is about how the Facebook family of services, the Messenger, Instagram, WhatsApp, how those receive close to 2.5 billion daily logins. They were some of the first to realize the value of AI, and they use it to market their products to their users. And so Facebook gathers all this information. They pursue messages, likes, clicks, and then they package it for their advertisers. And behind the scenes, Facebook uses AI to make sense of all of this information that they have, and they determine things like people's preferences and aspirations, the
Yep.
interpersonal ties. I mean, how often have you been on Facebook and you had a conversation about something and you're like, wait a minute, why is this ad for tires popping up on my screen when I was just
Yep.
talking to my wife about buying 2 tires for the car? Where did that happen from? Right. So what you missed is when you're talking to your wife, you also got online and Googled, some tire sale, and that got over into Facebook's algorithms, and now all of a sudden you're seeing ads on tires.
Yeah.
But it's crazy when you think about it, and it seems very intrusive, right? When I start seeing that kind of stuff, I feel like there's some level of violation that has happened in my
Yeah.
interpersonal
I
space.
get a little bit mad. I'll be honest. I get a little frustrated with it.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm like, I don't want to buy your tires just because you're presenting them to me, because I want to buy my own tires that I was already looking for. I mean, what are
Yeah.
you doing? Right.
Yeah. And you can turn all that crap off, but they'll figure out a way to update their system, and then suddenly it's all back on again. We all know
Yeah.
that.
I mean, so it's so frustrating. And I'll tell you this, I do remember this was 2010 or so. I was doing a lot of work with Microsoft corporate, and we were fixing some issues and with a memory leak and some code that they had that we were using, and we were doing this. We got invited to go up to the corporate offices, and work with the engineers on it. While we were there, we took a tour of a I can't remember whether it was a technology center, but they had two of these different technology centers that they're utilizing these cutting edge ideas. And one of these technology centers, and so these are typically reserved for like heads of states and things like that, because they're trying to get the same thoughts around technology out to people around the world so that it can spark innovation. That's their concept. So we went into one of these technology centers, and it was a supermarket. And they said, so what's interesting about this is you walk through the supermarket, and as you're walking through the supermarket, the monitors that are set up in the supermarket are selling to you. And they're selling to you based on all of this data that they've already collected on you prior to you even walking through the door. And when you walked through that door, it was able to determine who you was because you have a device on you, your cell phone, and it knows Jason just walked through the door. And now all of a sudden, all of the monitors are target marketing to you as you walk through it.
This
It's
is
like, hey,
technology they're working on right now. This is
no, this is
technology that's
technology
soon to
that
be.
they was working on this back in 2010.
Yeah, yeah, but I mean,
That's how far it was.
you
Yeah.
think about your normal trip to the grocery store. You're not really seeing that technology in play yet, but you got to think that we're not far from that. We
Oh
can't
yeah,
be
no,
far from
you're
that.
not. Especially with all the data that's already been collected on all of us, right?
Yeah.
This isn't a leap to get to this point. So then it becomes this question of, if all this data has been collected on us and it exists today, it's floating out there, right? Where's the line for all of this? Where's the line for what technology should be used for and what is just way over the line?
Yeah.
What are you guys' thoughts?
I, I think for me, and I think for a lot of people, that, and even the Social Dilemma, the documentary you mentioned, kind of highlights that there's a very good argument for that line has already been crossed. Unfortunately, I think that we are only just seeing the beginning of how technology will be used in order to manipulate human response, whether that is for capitalist purposes to market different things to you, or even for ideological and political purposes, which I think potentially is even more concerning.
Oh
So
yeah.
I recently wrote a blog on sociosploit that I entitled "Does AI Know Us Better Than We Know Ourselves?" And it was
Yeah.
looking at really one distinct thing that I just noticed a few days ago had taken place, and that was I was updating a lot of my content for my RSA talk on the same topic, and of course, just so much is going on that I just it's trying to drink from a fire hose with how much news is happening just in the
Yeah.
last few months. So I decided to sort all of the content on the ChatGPT subreddit as the top new or top headlines of all times. And what was fascinating to me is that the number one top headline on the ChatGPT subreddit was a person who had given a prompt to ChatGPT asking ChatGPT to create a clickbait article that would be the top post on that ChatGPT subreddit. And
Seriously.
I think there's a few possible explanations for it. Probably the Occam's razor, the most likely explanation is the fact that it was actually clever, self-referential, the fact that somebody posted this and then used the title that was generated by
Yeah.
ChatGPT. Of
Interesting.
course, that headline was 10 out of 10 must see moment. ChatGPT did something that will shock you to the core. So very clickbaity.
Yeah.
But then I think another possibility is that there was kind of an unspoken shared sense of irony for people as to why they upvoted it. But I think what's even more fascinating is the possibility of, is it possible that ChatGPT already understands enough about our human psychology based on all the data that's been fed into it, that it was actually able to achieve exactly what it was asked to do with flawless execution to put this as the very top headline. And so I think in reality, it's probably a combination of those factors, but I don't think it's a hard sell to say that in the near future, these systems will be able to use the data that they have available in order to achieve mass influence of human response. And so that's going to be stuff like you mentioned. So right now, these are just trained on general data, but it's very possible to train these systems on individual data, like the marketing data, the e-commerce behavior
Yeah.
data that they already have on us, just the general data about us from social media. And then just create a feedback loop of, did he purchase, did he not, and continue that reinforcement based on just continuing to persuade you and your shopping habits, or even more concerning, kind of cast a sentiment analysis on each of your posts on social media, rating it all the way from Breitbart to CNN. Where do you fall on the political spectrum? And then just
Wow.
take the moving average over time, and then just feed that back in to see if they can change your political perspectives from input that's consistently thrown at you. So
Wow.
it's a
God.
scary future.
Just like
Yeah.
when I watched that show on Netflix, Social Dilemma. This My mind is going in so many directions already on this stuff. It's you could just see this technology going so many different ways, and not many are good. We're going to talk about a few that are good, but it's like, man, I don't even. It just scares the hell out of me.
It is.
But
It's yeah.
But this
God,
is an example, as we're talking here, the things that were hitting me really hard are this is exactly why we're doing what we're doing,
yeah,
because all technology can be used for good and can be used for evil. And this is a stark example of how individuals like us have to really get involved in it to learn how to use it for more good than the
yeah.
bad guys are using it for evil. Because if
Well,
we do
that's
nothing and just
absolutely
let it
true.
take its course, right, we'll be behind the eight ball, and the bad guys are going to use this for evil. That's going to happen.
I think the
So,
thing that
I
makes
mean,
it so fascinating, though, is just the fact that this is a technology unlike anything we've seen yet. I mean, yeah, AI has been
yeah,
around, but the fact that it's now kind of going mainstream because of things like Chat GPT and Midjourney and some of these other solutions that are out there, and people are just kind of starting to realize the true power and the value in this, you're hearing about it more. So the fact that you're hearing about it more is raising more awareness. It's also getting more people into it, which is kind of scary with no regulation. But let's be real. I mean, that's tying this into cybersecurity is now is the time. Hopefully, it's not too late, but we've got to get involved in this and start figuring out ways to, if nothing else, protect yourself from the negative sides of where this can go.
What I think the challenge is that I absolutely agree with you from a cybersecurity perspective. We need to act immediately to understand the risk to the business. But the more concerning side is who is taking the action to identify the risk to the individual. Because, I mean, that's not a corporate interest, and it shouldn't be.
Right.
But
Right.
to your point earlier, there's no regulation around this. And I'm not a
Yeah.
huge advocate of government regulation around things,
No,
but
nor
this
am
has
I.
such scary potential of
Yeah.
where it could go that it at least needs people taking a look at it and starting to that conversation of what do we need to do to make this thing less of a problem for
But Hutch, that's the
society.
same. That's kind of the same point, in my opinion, is that I tell Kevin this all the time. As CISSPs, it is incumbent upon us to do due diligence to the general public,
Yeah.
not just to our organizations, but to help educate people, because we are the frontline defense. We are the ones that are going to make people more aware of what is coming at them and what steps they could take to protect themselves. And quite honestly, it's in the best interest of our organizations that we do that work, because those same people are going to work somewhere, and those same people who are going to work there are the most riskiest, asset that they have in the entire company. So the more people you can educate, hopefully, the more we're making an impact in reducing the risk that individuals have in the organizations that they work in.
Absolutely.
Well, the fact that one of the heaviest investors in this technology is scared out of his freaking mind or lying to us is not a good sign to me. I mean, let's be real here. I mean, the fact that he's invested so much into this and is terrified out of his mind that the cat's out of the bag and maybe a little bit too soon is not, it doesn't make me sleep well at night.
Well, and I think one of the challenges right now is that, especially with the ChatGPT stuff and the new search engine problem, is that Google and Microsoft are competing so hard to beat each other to the market that they're not taking the time to put the constraints around this thing.
And is this going to be one of those mindsets of get it to market, we'll patch the security holes later? You never know. I mean, when it comes to revenue and when it comes to billion-dollar companies staying in power, what shortcuts might they consider? Who knows?
Well, and it's a fine line too, right? So let's just think about secure by design techniques. How do you apply secure by design techniques for both the Google and Microsoft side? They would be reluctant to do it, because as soon as one person draws the line and said, we're not crossing this line, the other person's going to be like, yeah, we're crossing that line. That's what makes us so much better than you, right? And the line's just going to keep moving.
Put secure by design techniques to a technology that can advance itself. It doesn't need a human to advance it. It just needs data. It just needs data so that it can keep learning. How do you put freaking controls in front of that? Yeah. I mean, secure by design controls would just mean you just don't feed it more data. Yeah, that's not going to happen. All right. Well, hey, we've gone well into this episode, and Jason, I don't know if you know what I'm thinking, but I'm thinking we might need to split this thing into two.
Oh, this is definitely a two-parter.
Yeah, we got a lot to cover. We've come a long way so far, but we got a lot to cover still. Some good stuff to get into with Hutch. So I think we're going to split this thing up. It's going to be in episode 3 and episode 4, part 1 and 2 on AI, ChatGPT, and all things, machine learning, artificial intelligence, and where this thing can go. So let's end it here. We'll come back and start on the next segment of this. And until then, we'll see you soon.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
I'm Ashley. I'm an artificially generated avatar with the ability to manipulate your mind via the power of my intelligence botnets. Let me prove it to you. You're about to click on that subscribe button, and then you'll click on the notification bell so you don't miss when Kevin and Jason drop future episodes of the Cyber Distortion podcast. So, go ahead. That's right. Slide your mouse over slowly and gracefully. There you go. Now click. See, that wasn't so bad now, was it? I'd like to thank you for listening to today's amazing podcast episode on YouTube or your favorite audio streaming platform, and don't forget to tell your friends. Oh, and remain diligent, my cyber friends. The world is a very scary place.